You've seen the so-called top 4 mayoral candidates in the news. Tonight, we open up the field as Newswire LA brings you Emanuel Pleitez, candidate for mayor. All of this and more right after the credits. Hi, and welcome to Newswire LA. I'm your host, Chin Thomasangsi. Tonight we're bringing you another voice in the LA mayor's race. That voice belongs to Emanuel Pleitez. He is a candidate running for the top job in the city of Los Angeles. His name may not be familiar to you, but he's no stranger to local, state, and federal politics. He hasn't had a chance to do much debating because many of the debates shown on television and done in churches across the city have been limited to the top 4 candidates. But tonight, Newswire LA is opening up that field and bringing Emanuel Pleitez unplugged. And let's start with the most obvious question. Emanuel Pleitez, who are you and where did you come from?
I am the son of Mexican and Salvadoran immigrants who came to the States, and I was born in South LA, raised on the East Side by a single mother. I went through public schools here in LA, and I ended up having the privilege of going to school at places like Stanford University and working at institutions such as top investment banks and consultancies, as well as in the White House and the Department of the Treasury. And I've always remembered where I came from and come back to my neighborhood where I grew up in El Sereno on the east side to make sure that I can impact those communities in a positive way, so I can lend my experiences and make sure I'm looking out especially for young people and providing guidance. As I grew up, in fact, probably when, not grew up yet, but at about 10 years old, actually, my mom had a conversation with me and said, "You're the man of the house. What you need to help lead the house, whether financially or advice or translation or just understanding, documents, understanding what we need to be doing in terms of education, in terms of, managing the house, managing the things that you needed to take care of on a day-to-day basis." That, whether it helped or not, to me, I think it provided a certain sense of maturity at a very young age, and it was reflected in the types of folks I hung out with and kind of the openness that my mom allowed me to have, where I was very comfortable amongst much older people. In fact, I think the level of conversation, especially with folks in my neighborhood who may not be, the role models that you would think of, where I was engaged in conversations and actually received a lot of guidance and advice from older folks saying, "Don't follow my path, don't be like me, I believe in you, you can do more." And I think I really took that to heart, which it allowed me that as I was able to gain leadership roles, that I was never waiting for someone to tell me that you should lead. I always jumped out and said, "Let's get this done." And when I was, sitting on, perfectly manicured lawns at Stanford University, I was always thinking of what's going on back home, especially when a few times while I was a student at Stanford, I got calls from friends saying that another friend was shot and killed. And those types of things made an interesting juxtaposition in my life where I was like, I'm getting all this privilege because of my early success. However, there's a bunch of folks out there that are getting no more opportunities because of some bad decisions that they made as teenagers. I know how fragile life can be in those neighborhoods. My best friend in middle school, who was, I would say, even more talented than I was, he walked home a different way than I walked home. he had a little more of a negative influence in his life because maybe a couple more people that walked home with him influenced him in that way. I went off to Stanford University. He dropped out of school and is no longer with us. That's how fragile things can be in these neighborhoods, and I understand that. Now, the reason I made it is because I had a few more positive influences in my life. It could have been just one extra coach that looked at me and said, you hustle, you're going to get it. It's going to be there for you. Another coach that said, stay humble, because that's the only thing that you're going to take with you is your reputation. Make sure that you can't worry so much about all the accolades you get, but about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Those types of people were in my life throughout the years, and I found them somehow. In fact, one of the moments that is the most crystallized in my head is when I was a fifth grader, and I was talking to an older kid who was around 17 or so, and he had already dropped out of school. He had a baby, and he looked at me in the eye and said, I believe in you. I believe you can do it. Don't do what I did. And that's the type of person that no one else would think of as a role model. But to me, they provided the guidance. They provided some buffer of saying, I know what you can go through, and I know what you can be if you just go the right way. And I've taken all those positive stories all the way through my life to get to where I am now. But I never forget how fragile it could have been, and I could have easily been one of those statistics. But I've been very lucky. And now I need to apply those experiences, make sure that I am providing that extra guidance, and I'm putting other people in those places so that they could provide that guidance for our young people. Our young folks in this city need more positive outlets, and we need more people trained and facilitated so that they can actually be providing that guidance and helping our young folks have more positive outlets so that they can actually be successful and then come back to their neighborhood and be able to help others. Look, I went through public schools in LA where I think I was the first in, about 6 years or so to ever even get accepted to these schools. Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, Stanford, all those schools. And yeah, it was very different than coming from a, 95% Latino high school to, Stanford, which is very diverse in of itself. However, it was a culture shock. It was an academic shock. It was very different. But again, being able to experience that and then learning how to thrive in that scenario just added to the richness of my experiences so that I can be even more successful down the line. In fact, a lot of people feel that when you go to Stanford and some of these places, it's so competitive that you feel like, oh, all the dreams I had are no longer. Now I got to kind of just find my place, and then I can find my own little success there. I have felt even more empowered because of where I came from, because I understand the differences in the things that other people are going through, where I think an education in a place like Stanford and the fact that I was able to travel to 27 countries doing study abroad and other types of programs, and the fact that I then was able to work at the top investment bank in the world, those types of experiences have now given me even more confidence to be able to lead and not have to wait and kind of just find my little place in the world, that I need to create that place and help create it for others as well. So after I graduated from Stanford, I went into the private sector. I worked at Goldman Sachs. However, while at Stanford, I took a lot of time off of school. I took a year and a half off of school to work on political campaigns. So I actually worked for Antonio Villaraigosa when he was running for city council, when he ran for mayor. And then I worked for John Kerry as well on the presidential campaign. So politics was my first kind of foray into the real world of how this all works. But then I decided to go into the private sector because I felt that if you just know politics, you're not really going to be a good public servant. You need to understand how money works, you understand what everyday people are going through, and that's kind of how I got rounded out.
And now Emanuel takes on the issues that concern everyone living in the city of Los Angeles. For each question, look for the graphic at the bottom of the screen that will tell you what he's talking about.
The sad part is that this year we could have gone bankrupt. But what we're doing every year is having to cut a few $100 million from our budget so that we don't go bankrupt. And bankruptcy just means that we don't meet our liabilities. The sad thing is that our politicians have been in power for over a decade each, have made decisions that they have publicly said they regret, have made decisions on numbers that they didn't understand. Now look, I'm the only one that's worked on economic and fiscal policy at the highest levels, as well as worked in the private sector and understands what is actual job creation. So I'll have a fundamental different approach in that we need to reform the way we think about our budget and specifically our pension system. Because our pension system continues to be a much bigger part of the budget. And instead of reforming the pension system, what we're doing is, because we're afraid to challenge the interests behind that, we're cutting the social safety net of the city. We're cutting public works. We're cutting sanitation, street paving, right? Gang intervention programs, things that are impacting especially the hardest hit communities by this economy. And because they have less political power and less lobby power, the politicians at City Hall aren't being as responsive. That's just the fact of the matter. So I want to make sure that I, on day one, am addressing the reform of the pension system, and we can go on details about that, so that then we're looking at not having to cut our social safety net and being able to invest in education and training, so that we're building the skills and the opportunities of our workforce so that jobs can actually get created. The mayor doesn't create jobs. Any mayoral candidate that says I create jobs is naive, because they've never been in the private sector and actually created a job. Jobs are created because private enterprises are growing in a functional economy, and they can hire from a skilled workforce. As the chief strategy officer of a technology company, we had jobs every single week that stayed open and unfilled because there weren't people that had the skill set to get those jobs. That's what's going on in this economy, because there are some jobs available, but we need the capital and we need the workforce so that those businesses and jobs can grow, and the workforce that is skilled to get those jobs. I understand, and so my focus as mayor will be to address pension reform, and then have a 24/7 mindset on education and training so that we have more education to employment opportunities for all Angelinos. Number one is we need to bring all stakeholders to the table, and everyone needs to understand the gravity of our current situation. It's sad when other leaders in our city are saying, oh, it's not that bad. It is that bad. And until everyone realizes that it is that bad, then people don't want to negotiate. So number one is having the leadership to understand the argument and understand how to bring people to the table. Then the actual reforming of the pension system is that everyone needs to take a little bit. Everyone needs to give a little bit, right? We need to, one, raise retirement age. Two, we need to ask our workers to contribute just a little bit more, because our politicians made false promises. They promise way too much. It's like, if you're growing up and you have an allowance to someone, right? And they always are going to want more. Absolutely. At some point, you got to say, all right, that's enough, right? That's all we can afford for today, for this week, for this month. And the politicians have never had those tough conversations. They have said, okay, here's more because you got me elected. And that shouldn't be how decision making is done. So therefore, increase the retirement age, ask workers to contribute a little bit more, move towards 401k-like plans. Doesn't mean just 401k plans, but meaning we need to look at whether you actually are going to have the money left to actually fund these retirement plans. And then you need to look at innovative proposals such as pension buyouts, where workers will actually get money today instead of nothing tomorrow. And there's a number of things that you can do. And again, I've worked on this on retirement security at the national level with the heads of the biggest labor unions and experts, economists and experts on retirement security. And that's what I'm going to bring to the table so that we are addressing this on day one, so we stop cutting the social safety net of the city. Look, we shouldn't be creating more taxes because of bad decisions in the past. And this is what this sales tax and other measures to increase taxes and fees across the city, these are band-aids. They're short-term solutions. They're kicking the can down the road. Our politicians are not reforming the pension system, and therefore they're having to create these things that aren't good for the economy. This is regressive taxes. This hurts even the poorest people the most. These are bad solutions for what we're doing. Sadly, the politicians are in this place and they can't figure anything out because they're afraid to address the pension system. That's what needs to be addressed so that we don't have to be worrying about that. And look, I'm okay if we do do a sales tax, as long as we're actually creating more economic opportunity for people, not to try to fill a $200 million budget shortfall because we made a bad decision in the past, right? Any tax or fee that money needs to get reinvested into creating more economic opportunity and help our economy become a better engine for this country, quite frankly. And that's how I would look at any tax that we're doing, is making sure that it's not hurting poor people the most, and that the money is actually being invested into creating more opportunity, more economic opportunity for all, and broadening the tax base, so we're actually being better solvent, and being on a path to actually investing in the things that matter the most: education and training, technology, education to employment opportunities. It's funny that our politicians put a moratorium, and the amount of pot dispensaries quintuples. It's a sign of kind of a short-sighted reactionary type of politics, where 1 month they vote on putting the moratorium or limiting pot dispensaries, and the other month they're reversing and putting something on the ballot. We need to have a more comprehensive plan for this, and yes, we should legalize and make sure that we have pot dispensaries available, but we need to work with the federal government and reclassifying medical marijuana, and making sure that we are providing for the folks that do need this. Now, however, look, I understand the realities of this. If we make this illegal, and we don't allow this to exist, a black market will still get created, and that actually impacts the poorest neighborhoods the most. Because that's going at the heart of the drug trade. That's why it's happening. That's why there's friends of mine who decided to drop out of school, because it was more lucrative to do other things and deal with drugs than it is to go to school. If we open up the market and make sure that it's being processed in the right way, and we're taxing and providing fees for the things, what's called negative externalities, the things that are actually affecting these neighborhoods, the worst neighborhoods the most, then we're actually having a more comprehensive solution. And so it's not about putting some magic number on the amount of medical marijuana dispensaries. It's about looking at a more comprehensive solution and letting the market decide, but also assessing the right taxes and fees at all the negative things that come out of any type of business that is engaging in attracting, whether it's a bad area in the city, or having folks that are making wrong decisions because of those things being available in their neighborhoods. Number one is we need to look at unnecessary taxes, such as the gross receipts tax. We're taxing businesses on what's termed in the business world as top line, on revenue, meaning before they actually cut out their expenses. So any business that wants to grow in this city is immediately saying, I'd rather be in another city and build my business there, because they're not going to tax me on my revenue. They're going to look at other ways that I'm happy paying taxes if I'm working in that city, but not on the top line, right? So that's the kind of more businessy solution here, right? At the end of the day, in order for job creation to happen, businesses need to grow, so we're addressing that, but they also need to have a skilled workforce. They need to have the talent to hire, and then they need to have the capital to be able to grow, to invest back into their business. If we remove the gross receipts tax, then business will have more to be able to invest and hire within LA. If we invest in education and training, then our workforce will be skilled and be able to get the jobs that are available. And if we attract capital, with my finance background, understand more of how these investors think, and I will help them understand the risk of investing in these areas, especially the most underserved areas, then you're going to have the right trifecta of businesses growing, of skilled workforce, and capital flowing into LA. That's how we will create jobs in LA, and the mayor needs to facilitate that environment for it to happen. Like this is something that's close to my heart. I've had friends pass away